This is John Abrams, and this is the Variety Artist, episode 66. I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. Summer's kicking my butt. For me, it's even busier than the school year. 2 to 4 shows a day, every day but Sunday. I haven't even had a chance to catch up on the most recent UFC fights. So here's what I thought. Over the next few weeks, I'm going to share some of my favorite interviews. These are the very best of the Variety Artist podcast. Great info and great stories. That's what you're going to get. This first one is Steve Trash, Rockin Eco Hero, possibly my favorite podcast of any I've ever done or listened to. In fact, I was talking to a friend a couple of months ago, and she remembered exactly where she was when she first listened to this one. His journey from sleeping in his van to becoming one of the top entertainers in the country is legendary. Since this interview, he's done so much, including his own TV show on PBS. You can download the app and watch him now. If you've been a loyal listener to the Variety Artist, you'll love listening again. If you're fairly new, you're in for a treat.
Welcome to the Variety Artist, providing aspiring artists and entertainers with in-depth discussions from top performers from all over the world. So get ready to book some gigs, make some money, and have some fun with your host, John Abrams.
Today's guest mantra is be good, be amazing, don't be mean. He combines his love for magic and his love for ecology to create educational entertainment for children of all ages. He's entertained over 25 million people since 1984 and appeared in theaters, fairs, and festivals all over the world, including Japan, Australia, Canada, Portugal, Spain, and the United Arab Emirates. He's appeared on CBS, ESPN, CNBC, HLN, and VH1. The magician that's been on the forefront of the green movement since the beginning. Variety Artists, I give you Rockin Eco Hero Steve Trash.
How could I ever live up to that, John? Come on.
Well, I think if anybody can do it, you can.
Well, thanks.
So we're going to talk about lots of things, branding. We're going to talk about how you became Steve Trash from just a regular magician. But before we get into all of that, tell me about your personal life. What do you do just on a day off?
Wait a minute. I'm in show business, John. We don't have days off, do we? What exactly is that? Actually, that's hilarious because I was just thinking the other day that it's one of my personal things is I get peeved at people that take weekends. You know what I mean? Like a regular straight job person. Like I send them an email and I'm like, well, why don't you send back an email on Saturday? We all work on Saturday. Why don't you send back a letter on Sunday or give me a phone call on Sunday? We all work on, and I forget that the normal world doesn't run on show business schedule.
I got a call last night at 9:30 at night for this podcast, and I answered it. I answered the phone, and I talked to this person. We set up an interview for a few weeks from now. But for him, actually, he was out of Georgia, which is 3 hours difference from me. So for him, it was 12:30 at night.
Years ago, because I love show business and I love show business people, someone referred to any job not in show business as, what's your straight job? This is what actors in New York call, I don't know what LA does, but in New York, if you're not making a living in show business, but you're trying, what they want to know is, what's your straight job? You drive a cab, do you wait tables? Are you a temp? All of that stuff. And I still refer to that as a straight job because they don't have a good job. Our job is good.
I think in LA, the question is a bit more insulting. It's what's your real job?
Well, yeah, if they ask that question, they don't really know what they're missing. As I told you, I am a blabbermouth and will jabber on. So going back to the question that you asked, I'm sitting in my office right now. I live in a really, really, really small hamlet called Frog Pond, Alabama. Frog Pond, Alabama, population 76 when I'm not home. My wife and I own about 80 acres. We live in an earth-bermed house, which means it's kind of dug underneath to be as energy conservative and temperature conservative as possible. I have a 21-panel PV solar array in my front yard. It's a really super efficient house. I'm a bit of a country mouse. I really enjoy living out in the woods. I enjoy working in the city. My training was theater, so I really love cities and I love performing in theaters. but I like living out in the woods. My kids are all grown. They're all sprinkled all over the world. They're, let's see, Athens, Georgia. One, Emily lives up in New Jersey, and Aaron lives in South Carolina.
Well, I was going to ask about your house because I looked on your website and I saw all the panels, and you have a greenhouse. It may not be the color green, but it's green. So you live what you preach.
Well, there's a really great story that Gandhi. It may be apocryphal. I'm not really sure. That Gandhi said this woman came up to Gandhi and said, "Look, my kid, he's getting fat. He eats too much sugar. He respects you. Would you tell him to stop?" And Gandhi says, "Okay, come back in 3 weeks, and I'll talk to him." So the mom says, "Okay, 3 weeks. Okay, that's weird." So she comes back in 3 weeks, and Gandhi says to the kid, "My friend, sugar is bad for you. You need to stop eating sugar." The kid goes, "Oh, well, you're Gandhi. I respect you. Okay, I'll quit." The mom takes Gandhi one side and says, Why 3 weeks? He said, "Oh, I had to quit sugar first." So if you're going to talk to children and grown-ups about ecology, it is kind of hypocritical if you don't try to close that gap between what is possible and what you can do yourself. So living as green as a human can possibly live in the 21st century is my goal. That's why I invested in solar, because if someone asks me a question about solar, I can tell them all of the good stuff and all of the bad stuff. I don't believe in greenwashing, because if you tell people the truth about the environment and how the natural world works and how ecology works, they can make great decisions. So you don't need to BS anybody.
Right, because you're living it.
Yeah, and I can say, here's the bad part, here's the good part.
Yeah, here's one of the problems that I have with a lot of high school and college teachers is that they've never done it themselves. You know, if they're teaching, for example, marketing, they've never marketed a real business. So how can you teach marketing at a high school or a college if you've never marketed a real business? And it's the same with ecology, conservation, all the things that you're doing. How can you teach that if you don't live it yourself?
Absolutely. At a deep level, I mean, I'm taking ecological principles that I did learn from high school and university textbooks and trying to understand those really complex concepts and doing what every other family kid entertainer does. I'm breaking them down into really simple forms, and that's the most interesting part of my job, is breaking those things down into simple forms. But if you don't walk it, you probably shouldn't talk it.
Exactly. Well, now let's go back. How did you go from just average magician to the Rockin eco hero that you are?
Can I tell you the real story? Because I mean, it's actually a kind of an interesting story.
Please do.
Where Steve Trash was born.
Please.
Okay, so I grew up in Northwest Alabama, which is pretty close to where I still live, Frog Pond. I grew up in Florence, Alabama, sister city, Florence, Italy. And this little community has you would never believe this. If you live anywhere else, you'd never believe little Florence, Alabama, and the Shoals, we call it, Muscle Shoals, Tuscumbia, Florence, and Sheffield, has a really, really strong tradition of theater, of community theater. And I grew up in that community theater sort of tradition. And I knew, because I was able to be on stage a lot, that I had an ability to connect with audiences when I was on stage. I was pretty good at it. It gave me a lot of experience. So when I was probably around 17, 18, probably 17, I might have even been 16, I'm not sure. The Florida Magicians Convention, I think it's called the Florida State Association, had a convention. I'd never been to one. I'd never even met a professional entertainer, a professional magician. But at this point, I knew this is what I want to do. I'm good at being on the stage. I want to be a variety artist. I study it in all of my free time. I need to know what the secret is. So I hear that this guy, Marvin Roy, whose stage name is Mr. Electric.
That's right, Mr. Electric.
Mr. Electric has been on the cover of every magic magazine that I've ever read. Because remember, I've never met a professional entertainer. So my only connection to that world is through magic magazines, right? In that case, it was Genie magazine, right? Okay, so I realized he's going to be at this convention that I could go to, and possibly, hand trembling, I would get to meet Mr. Electric, right? So I'm like, I gotta go all the way to Florida. Cool, man, I'm doing this. Game on. My friend and I, we packed down there, on our way down. I don't have any money. I'm just a kid, so we sleep in the back of a Ford Courier truck, which I highly do not recommend if your friend is fat and you are tall, but that's a different story. So 16, 17, I was probably on the cusp of college. So I get down there to this convention. I've never been to a magician's convention before, and frankly, I don't really know what's going on. So I'm looking around and I'm hanging out and I'm sort of sitting down, and my friend Alex is sleeping. He loves to sleep in. And I see, there's Mr. Electric. I recognize him from all of his pictures. So I walk over and I'm trying to be totally cool. And I'm not really starstruck. It's just I want to know. And so I walk over and I say, hello, Mr. Electric. My name is Steve. I really want to be in show business, and frankly, I don't have a game plan. I don't really know how to do this. Do you have any advice, or words of wisdom or things? And he looks at me and he's so kind. I mean, he's like, yes. And he says, I'll tell you what you need to know right now. And my ears, they go 10 sizes bigger, right? I'm leaning in and trying not to be really peculiar and weird. And he says, here's the thing. There are literally thousands of magicians. If they want a magician, they have lots of choices. But, and listen close to me, kid, if they want the guy with the light bulbs, they want me. So you need to go find your light bulb. Now, I'm not, to mix a metaphor and use a metaphor, I'm not the brightest bulb in the box, but I knew that I had just been handed manna from heaven, because what Mr. Electric was telling me is be so unique in the marketplace, be just so incredibly unique that they had to ask for you, rather than asking for someone in your category,
right,
if you will. And in fact, you might even try to be your own category. I mean, years ago, people said, why didn't you call yourself Steve Recycle instead of Steve Trash? I said, first of all, I think Steve Trash is a lot funnier. To me, that's, maybe I'm kind of not that smart, but to me, Steve Trash is hilarious.
It is. And it's memorable also. Anybody who I've told that I'm going to be interviewing Steve Trash, if they've heard of you, they're excited about it. But if they haven't heard of you, they're like, oh, Steve Trash? That's an interesting name. I'll look him up. It's true.
Yeah, well, being unique, and it was a gift that I was given, is that my proper last name, the name I was given when I was born, it's very hard to spell. People in South Alabama, they changed the spelling, and so it's a traditional sounding name, but it's spelled really weird. So I was like, no. I need to have this name that's really recognizable. And what's hilarious is, and we can go deeper into this, because there was an inspiration as to why Steve Trash became what it is. It's because I'm really, really passionate about ecology, but frankly, I'm more passionate about trash. What magicians do and what storytellers do is they transform the way you see something. And to me, as a kid, I totally got that trash should always be considered valuable. It's a natural resource that people are not clever enough to use. So when you're throwing this thing away, it just means you're just not that smart.
And you haven't planned, right?
No, you haven't. I mean, we have a system that allows for creating an enormous amount of waste, which is why I'm not a big eco finger pointer. If you have to use a plastic bottle, or you go to the dry cleaners every once in a while, or you drive a bazillion miles a year in your vehicle, we don't really have a choice other than trying to reduce our impact on the planet. And that's what I'm about, is getting people to use what tools they have to reduce their impact. And there are ways that even someone like you and we drive a lot. I have to drive a van. I carry a lot of trash. So a couple of years ago, I was like, you know what? I seriously need to reduce my carbon footprint. I'm going to go from a big Ford 350 down to a little Transit Connect. Now, there was an enormous amount of packaging packing and downsizing that had to happen, but I reduced my carbon footprint, and that was a small step that I could take. I can't not go on the road, but I
Right.
can reduce the amount of gas.
Both of us. I used to drive same thing. I used to drive a big, nice van, and the reason that I cut down is simply financial. I ended up getting a smaller car that I could fit all of my stuff in the back of a nice hatchback car, and I doubled my mileage and cut my finances. Cut the amount I spent in half.
Well, here's the thing, John, is that entertainers tend to be, at least with my experience, tend to be very open to the muse. They're open to ideas. And there was a business book written several years ago, and I just locked into this concept, and it was this. We have to ignore the tyranny of the or, meaning it's this choice or that choice, because that's a false dichotomy sometimes. Do you have to reduce your impact on the environment completely, or by stopping driving, or can you reduce your impact? And instead of having to make this choice between a false dichotomy, a healthy environment or a healthy economy, that's one of the biggest false dichotomies. You have to choose the magnificence of the and, that you can have a healthy environment and a healthy economy. And the second you see that and is possible, all of these possibilities start appearing to you. But until you recognize the magnificence of the and, you can't even see it.
Right. And the world is completely unlimited on the choices that we have. If you do get stuck in that this or that, you're only giving yourself the two choices.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I did an illustration years ago, and it works like this: is that I don't know if you've ever purchased a red car.
I have a red car.
You have a red car. Okay, so the day after you purchase a red car, all of a sudden you probably start seeing bazoodles. That's, by the way, bigger than a Googleplex. You start seeing enormous numbers of red cars. And the reason that you start seeing lots and lots and lots of red cars is because you just spent a lot of money on a red car. So you subconsciously told your mind that red cars have real value to you and should be noticed. That same thing applies to the magnificence of the and. That as soon as you start looking for ands, well, but it doesn't have to be or. It could be I can have a healthy environment and a healthy economy. As soon as you start looking for those, you start seeing lots of red car choices that you can then choose.
That just opens you up for a whole new world.
Yeah, it does. And I'm a big believer. Very early in my career, I don't know if this is a surprise or not, but really early in my career, virtually no one except audiences understood what I was attempting to do as Steve Trash, because I started in '84. I graduated with a degree in theater from the University of North Alabama, and 2 days later, I'm busking in Washington Square Park in New York City.
Oh, and now we look at it and we say, well, gosh, the recycling movement and this whole green movement is a big deal. But in 1984, there were very few people talking about it, right?
Yeah, and that was there was a hard road to hoe, but it was easier to get audiences and just regular people to understand it than it actually was, say, like the magic community or variety entertainers. I think they just simply didn't understand what I was attempting to do. And I don't completely put the blame on them, but if you're making something up from whole cloth, you're not going to be as good. I mean, remember, I never even saw a professional magician or met one. I didn't go to magic clubs. They didn't exist where I lived. I lived out in the country. So I was not a very good magician in the beginning of my life. Now, I was committed to being better, but YouTube didn't exist. I couldn't see what a perfectly performed magic trick looked like. And I also... I'm a natural-born entertainer. I am not a natural-born magician or musician. So those things I really have to hammer and try to get better at.
Yeah, your story is very much like mine. I was also a theater major. I loved performing, but just like you, magic came a little more difficult for me. It was a little more difficult for me to do. So I have to work a
Mhm.
little harder on that. I'm a born entertainer. I love entertaining. That's what I love to do. But the
Right.
technical portion itself is much more difficult.
Yeah, I think, and something that I really enjoy, because I've listened to several of your podcasts, and every guest you've had has, I thought, been very excellent. And one of the things that I thought each brought to it was this focus on being an actual variety artist, even if you are, say, a magician or a musician, is that you look at the broad spectrum of what that means. I mean, when I was a kid, I was really turned on by the whole thing. I was a big fan of the Karamazov brothers, or Avner the Eccentric, or puppeteers, ventriloquists, even European style clowning. It all cranked my tractor, and I wanted to learn every possible thing I could. And in the very earliest years of my life, and this is a pretty good anecdotal story, is when I was, my dad died when I was 14, very suddenly. And my mother, God bless her, she pulled together enough money to send me for this class trip for 2 weeks to Europe. We went to France and we went to England. So she just knows that I'm passionate about street performing and busking. Although I've never seen anybody do it. I don't really know anything about it, but I've read books about it, and it must be awesome. So I show up, and we're in Paris, France. We hit the streets, because I'm like, I got to go find me a busker, right? I got to get out here, da 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 da. And I see this guy, and he does slack rope, and he does, he jugs flaming torches, and he's very, very, very good. Like, yes. Exclamation point good. I'm like, fantastic. Boom. That guy was fantastic. That's where the bar is. Okay. Shuttle forward about 8 years. I live in New York City. I'm in Washington Square Park, and I see that guy. Oh. And I'm like, that's that guy I saw in Paris, and I went, oh my God. The first street performer I ever saw was Philippe Petit.
Oh my.
So I think they're all this good, because I don't know anything. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm terrible. So I'm 15 or 16. I'm like, I'm so horrible. This man is so good. I really, really, really need to get to work. And then I realize I've seen sort of the dean of street performers, my first shot out.
Well, that's actually pretty good, because you set your bar in your mind awfully high.
I did. I didn't realize there were a lot of buskers out there just absolutely stink. They're just terrible. But I saw him and I thought, okay, this guy encompasses everything that I would like to be. I mean, I don't want to copy him. In fact, I don't even want to do any of the things he does skill-wise, but I love the way he controlled his audience through not speaking. And I got to watch him a lot when we were, I was in New York in what we call the birth of crack days. And so, Washington Square was pretty rough. I learned a lot. There was Tony Vera, the fireman, and Charlie Barnett, the comic. And I'd be, little Steve Trash over the corner doing tricks with stuff people would pick up off of the street. Hey, do magic with this. If I could do magic with that, I'd get a better, hat at the end of the performance.
So did you study like bar magic or something where somebody could just give you something and you do magic with it then?
Oh, that's a really good question. The answer is no. What happened is, as I began to busk in New York, I would do Washington Square, and then on the weekends, I would usually go up to. There's a place called the Children's Zoo in the southeastern corner of Central Park, and it's near the Delacorte clock. And so I would set my stuff down there. And what I found was people would literally pick stuff up and hand it to me and say, can you do a trick with this? And I thought, I could develop my chops as a magician if I could do a trick with anything someone ever handed me. And that really began to blossom, taking on this idea that Mr. Electric gave me to be my own thing. Order my light bulb. And my light bulb started to be trash and ecology and connections that exist in the environment, because fundamentally trash doesn't exist. Trash is a resource that you've made into this thing that has no value, but it always has value. The resources that you and I have as humans they can only come from two places, the sun or from the earth. Two places, and they're both limited. They're big, but they're both limited. So they're inherently valuable. So as these people started giving me stuff, an old candy wrapper or a Sucrets box, I was struck by this idea that I'm pretty sure.
The way, for the younger folks that are listening, a Sucrets box is kind of like an Altoids box.
Yeah, but way better and way rustier and older and uglier. Yeah, that's exactly what I think. Thank you for translating into someone who's not. Wait a minute, let me go get my cane. Hold on a second.
Yeah, I got a Sucrets box here. So someone would hand you a Sucrets box, and
right. Well, it just meant to me. I was able to strengthen my magic muscles, which I knew were not as good. I really liked sleight of hand a lot. In fact, it is my preference because I was never really a great street performer. I was never a great busker because what I really enjoyed was people standing around, me having a garbage can for a table and performing things on top of that. And really, it's kind of walk around close-up magic. That's the style that I liked. And frankly, I even adapted that into a situation where it would work at fairs and festivals. But I wasn't really busking, with these big, huge tips where people are standing around, 100, 200, 300 people. But I did get better as a magician simply through people handing me their trash.
Sure. Well, let's talk about your career then. I see you do a lot of theaters, and I was looking on your website, and sometimes you bus people in, you do school assemblies. What are all the different venues that you do?
Well, that whole portfolio being diversified, I'm a big believer in. About a third of the year, I do school assemblies where I just come into the school, and I am a national act. I do not work hardly ever in Alabama. I travel all over the country. Wherever they need me, that's where I'm going to go. So about a third of the time I do schools. About a third of the time I'm playing state fairs. I don't usually play county fairs. Truthfully, I'm just too expensive. But I do play state fairs. I've been at the Wisconsin State Fair, go Cheeseheads, for 26 years in a row. And the last and my most favorite is to work these really excellent performing arts venues. The performing arts venues, they have a union crew. Basically, it is a curriculum-based educational show that teachers can take an entire day away from their classroom to basically bring the kids to a theater classroom. And that's of all of the things I do, that's my most favorite.
So when you go to a town, and do you have a theater for 2 or 3 days, and then you contact the schools around, or your agent contacts schools around, or how does that all work?
Yeah, it works the opposite way. What you've got is you've got a venue. I'm not sure why we call them venues. It's a theater, right? It's right. A theater that has its regular touring season. And one of the things that they do, other than just having, say, a touring Broadway show, one of the things that they do is outreach for the theater, because they want to showcase what theater is and how magical it is to children. And so they will have an educational series, and they know the only way to get you in that room, the only way for those teachers to justify a day away, is it has to be curriculum based. So the actual venue books those, because it's a hard ticket thing. They pay me to come in and do 2 shows in a morning, usually like a 9 and an 11 or an 11 and a 1. And I do 2 back-to-back shows, and they fill up an 800 or 1,200 seat room, and they do the ticketing. They do all of it. It's usually discounted price. It's not a high ticket item, $8, $10 a kid. And they come in as a school group.
Gotcha. So they bust them in. And when you show up, you just show up with all your props and such. And how do you get there? Do you fly all your props in, or do you have them driven in, or how does that work?
Yeah, no, the only time that I ever fly is when I do international gigs. I drive everywhere, because for me to fill the stage with as much sort of gack as I possibly can, it just simply looks cooler, and it gives me the option to do more stuff. My years as a busker taught me always be able to reach in your back pocket if something is not working. That's a metaphorical back pocket. If something's not working, you need to be able to pull out something that does work and will work for this particular room. If they're just not feeling it, you need to go somewhere else, bring out a different routine. And so I have a lot of stuff crammed in the back of a Transit. I pull up, it takes me, basically the typical day is going to look like this. Your curtain, let's say curtains at 9. That means doors open at 8:30. I have to have a 2-hour load in because I have 29 boxes that have to come in. Usually they've been sent a light plot in advance. And so they have focused the lights the way I've asked them to. And I need to unpack all of the props. I have to set all of the props up. We have to run because not only do I need to have my headset, I perform some music with cigar box guitars, with a gas can guitar, both of which are, of course, reclaimed from trash. And we have to check that audio. I need to make sure the monitors are working. And that just simply takes a long time. So I usually ask for 3, and because I'm working almost exclusively union houses, they won't give me 3 because that starts the crew too early in the morning and they get time and a half. So I'm always slamming and jamming, man. I don't talk, I don't do anything. There's no conversation. I am throwing boxes around. I am moving stuff. I'm plugging in XLR cables, man. I look like what's the whirling dervish?
Tasmanian devil.
Tasmanian devil, that's it. Yeah, that's exactly what I look like. I look like a Tasmanian devil wearing a Mad Hatter's hat. The part of the magic of it took me years to get what I even consider an algorithm of how this works. Because if you're going to work performing arts venues, your first question isn't what's the show you're going to do. Your first question is, how do you put butts in seats? Because if you can't do that, you don't have a career in performing arts market. You don't.
That's pretty much with any market, any library market, theater market, any market. Getting people there. If you can get people there and guarantee that the house is going to be packed, you have a much better chance of booking the show.
Yeah, and that's really a hard nut to crack. That's why I've enjoyed the series of people that you're interviewing, because they all, at least the 4 or 5 I've listened to, they all seem to, they think smart and they do smart things to make themselves as appealing as possible. Now, you would think that me being such a find your light bulb kind of guy, I would know this intuitively, but I have been really, really, really working hard in the last 4 to 5 years to make my show about me, not about what I do. Right. And now that may sound egotistical, and frankly, I think that's why it came late, is because I was very concerned about being seen as being only ego driven while I was on the stage. But I have this idea that the only reason they really come is they love you. And the second most important thing is you do cool stuff. The most important is they simply love you.
I was watching a video on podcasting, trying to learn more about podcasting and how it all works. And one of the guys was talking about the reason people tune in to the Joe Rogan Experience, to the Adam Carolla Show, to the big ones, is not because of what they do or what they say. It's because of who they are. So if you can tackle that first, you're going to be much more successful. If people are coming to see you because they want to see what you do and who you are, then more people are going to come see you.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think to that end, that's something that we can always be working on. I mean, if you will look at the transformation of, say, my costume, the only thing that has remained consistent over the years since 1984 is I've always worn patchy pants and a top hat. Everything else about that has really transformed because I'm an experimenter. On the stage, I will experiment with new routines. I will experiment with new looks. I will experiment with new. The web guy that you interviewed, he was saying put 2 of them up there and see which one they like better. That's right. A great idea.
Josh London talking about split testing. That's what he was talking about.
I think you can do that in person too. I think you can do that live in your performance and just see. I mean, I really bend towards silly, goofy humor. And what I found is the audience doesn't love that. I have to come off as a bit cooler a bit hipper, a bit more rock and roll. Fine. That's what they want. That's what I'm going to deliver.
One of the pieces of advice I always give is once you put your show together, go ahead and replace a routine with another routine, see how it plays. Sometimes the new routine will play much better than your old routine, even though you think your old routine is great.
Yeah, and sandwich it, obviously, you probably say this as well, but sandwich it in the middle. Stick it in the middle so it completely hoses. You can pull the thing out of a nosedive and you go, whatever. That's a thing that it took me a long time to realize, but some of the greatest magicians I know are people that you can just smile when the thing goes completely belly up, and they acknowledge that and they go, that didn't work the way I wanted it to. And then they just move on.
Yep. And I think the audience appreciates that. They know that you know.
Yep. Yeah. And that makes you more human, because they know that you're not really defying the laws of nature. They know this. And so if you can own that when things really go terrible, obviously you should have rehearsed. It should be tight. But you know what? We do live things. Weirdness happens. Murphy's Law. Stuff happens.
Yeah, I have a funny story about that. I was years and years and years ago, I was stage managing for a corporate magician. We set up the stage right next to the pool. It's at this big resort hotel. And we set up the stage right next to the pool. And I tell them, the stage has got to be 4 or 5 feet away from the pool because we don't want any incidents. And sure enough, in the middle of the show, the magician that I was working for steps off the stage to jump off the stage to do a routine and goes right into the pool. At first, he comes out of the pool a little bit frustrated and looking at the audience like, oh, gee, that didn't really happen. And then all of a sudden, he took a deep breath and he said, I just fell into the pool. I'm soaking wet. I'm going to do the best I can with what I have. And the audience applauded and they loved it because they knew, how are you going to get around that?
You can't. You got to totally own it.
Tell me about schools. So you do a lot of schools. You said you don't do a lot of shows around your area. So you travel to schools? How does that work?
That's one of the things that all entertainers have to decide. Do you live in a metropolitan area that will support you locally? You have to decide very early on. My wife, who I refer to as the art goddess, I was home from Los Angeles here in Alabama I was visiting my mom, and I met my future wife, and I realized, look, I have to remain a national touring act because there's no chance I can make a living in show business in Alabama. So that's the way I built my career, is that I would be a national touring act and I would go anywhere, anybody wanted me to go, as long as they had the cold, hard, stinking cash.
That's right. So you pack up your transit and you go to a school if they have the cold, hard cash?
I have actually 3. I always travel with all 3 shows in the transit.
So you have 3 completely separate shows. And are you talking about different schools will hire you for different shows, so you bring all of them along?
Nope. I'm talking about markets. So, for instance, the smallest show that I ever do is for fairs and festivals. And so I have that set of gear. Same theme, same Steve Trash, Tricks with Trash, same ecology theme. But then slightly larger would be my in-school assembly show, which I have way too many props for a school show. There is no way I can get into a school faster than 1 hour. No possible way. And that's with 5 kids helping me load in and load out. And I'm violating every tenet of show business that I know of for assembly shows. But that's just how I created my life, and it's worked for this long, so I'm not going to change it now. And then the biggest show, of course, is performing arts venues, because remember, you have to be able to reach the back of the room with everything that you are doing. And so in some cases, you've got to have some gear, not big illusions, but you've got to have some gear that's large enough to see from the worst seat in the house.
Now, what's the difference between, do you book a lot of these yourself? Do you have agents? One of your agents actually joined my Facebook group, The Variety Artist, your fair and festival agent. Do you have different agents for different markets?
I do. I've broken them up to be very specific, because what I find, and this is just in my own personal life, what I have found is it's better for the artist and it's better for the agent to be market specific. And yeah, Mark Sparks, who is a fantastic agent. He's with Triangle Entertainment. And part of the reason he's so good is he spent years being a touring entertainer. So he knows the garbage, no pun intended. He knows the garbage that we traveling entertainers go through. So he asks really good questions of the client. And so, a fabulous agency and a fabulous guy.
And so you have different agents for different markets?
I do, yeah. Actually, Harmony Artists, Jerry Ross represents me in the performing arts market. They're a big agency out of Los Angeles, and they exclusively book me into performing arts venues. I mean, as an example, if someone calls my executive assistant, Pam, and says, hey, we'd like to bring Steve into our performing arts venue in, Buffalo. Pam just says, great, I'm going to send you to Jerry. And so we just send it over to them because they know the right questions to answer, and they book the shows. I book most of the school shows myself, but frankly, that's a little bit of a misnomer. My executive assistant handles that for me.
Because you can show up and do the show.
Yeah, well, think about this. I mean, that's actually, that's really important to me, is that, first of all, I want to focus on the stuff that I am best at. And I'm dyslexic, which means that I don't read very well. I misunderstand some things I'm reading. I reverse letters and numbers. And so if you can hire someone, which is what I've done for the past 4 or 5 years, to be your executive assistant, and their only job is to focus on pieces of paper, right? On contracts, on forms, on additionally insured certificates, and making sure that on February the 20th, I have a reminder on my text. February the 20th, you're supposed to be in Milwaukee. Someone else checking that stuff frees me to do the stuff that I need to do. In fact, frankly, I've broken it down. I can tell you, if you're interested, I can tell you exactly what the big rocks are for me. The big rocks go into the jar, and those are the ones you should be focusing on. So I know what mine are.
What do you mean by that?
Okay, so Stephen Covey used to tell a story about he's got a glass and he's got a glass, and he says to people in the audience, and he's going to put like 3 or 4 big rocks in, and then he's going to put smaller rocks, and he's going to put sand in there, then he's going to put water, and he says, what's the moral of this story? And people guess and guess and guess, and they all guess incorrectly, and some people guess, oh, you can always put more into your day, blah 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 blah. No. He said the moral of the story is, if you want the big rocks, the most important things, in, you have to put them in first. So put the big rocks in first. If there's something that Steve Trash can exclusively do that no one else can do for me, that's a big rock. I should be focused on that. And I have a list. I have a list of 5, and these are my big rocks. Actually, the list is 6. But the 6th is to delegate, is to find somebody to do it. I can create, perform, steer the ship, prepare, relax, R&R. And then the 6th, of course, is delegate.
Those are terrific.
Well, think about it. Nobody else can do that for us, John. Nobody can create. Nobody else can perform. Nobody can prep it. Nobody can steer the ship, and nobody can rest for you. Those are the things that God gave you the talent to do. You can outsource all the other stuff. I mean, Pam, I call Pamela every Friday morning, and we run my calendar, and she makes sure that the calendar that I have on Google matches the calendar that's going to go on my website. She asks me all of the questions that clients may have asked. And now look, I'm paying her $30 an hour, but you know what? For somebody like me, I want to be focused on making new entertainment. I want to be focused on performing and being amazing every time I'm on stage. I want to be looking 5 or 10 years down the road, which is steering the ship. I want to know where this ship that is Steve Trash is going. And if I'm spending time hassling with getting a stupid additionally insured certificate, that's a waste of my time. I don't want to, not everybody can afford that. And I've not been able to afford that my whole life. So I would say just focus on the big rocks. Sometimes we got to do like taxes. I do taxes, right? That's spending time with pieces of paper. You have to do that, but try to eliminate all of the things that someone else could do for you, and start small, and then continue pushing those things out. Because I can tell you, when I hired an executive assistant to deal with pieces of paper and frankly deal with just order and making sure I don't forget things, my creativity really moved into sort of steroid division.
Yeah, I'll bet it did, because now all you're focusing on is the creativity and the creating of your show and the performing of your show. And you don't have to worry about all the rest.
And where will it go? That's right. And worry is the proper word, John. We're given this gift of being creators, and I have the opinion that every person is creative, and every person innately needs to create. Now, you may be a mathematician, but you are pulling ideas out of the world. You're making stuff happen. You don't have to necessarily be a variety artist or a painter or a sculptor or a dancer to be creative. You can be creative in your own field, but I think you are smashing something that is extremely important to being a human if you are spending too much time doing this other garbage. So try to find a way to minimize that stuff in your life if you can.
I'm going to take that advice myself, because I'm a little bit of a control freak and I have a tendency to do everything myself. I can do it. I can take care of everything. So I'm going to take that advice myself and make my life a little bit easier.
Yeah, it's hard because I'm a little bit of a control freak as well. And so there is a transition that you have to go to. My one suggestion is, if you are going to push out, you're going to delegate, make a list of exactly what that process should look like, right? Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. And consider that the person is an idiot, because you and I know so much more about our life and about our business and about what we do than we think we know. And so sharing that as, this happens first, then that happens, then this happens. And if there's a contingency, here's choice A or B, just call me and we'll decide which one is better.
That's great. That's a great idea. I'm going to do that right now, or right after we stop recording. I'm going to start writing some things down. Dang. All right. Well, let's we're running a little low on time. So you want to play a game?
Hit me. I love games.
Okay. We're going to play a game called Fact or Something John Just Made Up.
Is it fact? Or is it something John just made up?
Well, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to give you a number of headlines, and you tell me if it's true, and maybe tell me a little bit about it, a little story about it, or if it's something I just made up. You ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
Here we go. First headline. During the middle of her performance in Nagasaki, Japan, a very old woman walked onto the stage and dumped her leftover noodles into Steve Trash's trash can / magic show table.
That is 100% true.
That is true.
Okay, so here's the scenario. I'm working in Orandamura, which is Japanese for Holland Village. The Japanese and the Dutch had a very long tradition of trading together in the 19th century. And so there's this amusement park called Holland Village, right? And they loved having what looked like, to their eyes, European-style buskers or street performers. So sure enough, I'm in Nagasaki. I've got this big, huge tip. I mean, there's tons of people around me, maybe 200 people or something. So they're at least 40 feet away from me in a 360-degree circle. Now, I'm Steve Trash. I have always performed with a garbage can, a big 55-gallon brute garbage can as my table, and I have a little top on there. So this little old lady, she was so adorable. She was tiny, and not comprehending that there was a show happening. She begins to sort of totter forward, and she walks into the group, and the Japanese people, who are the most respectful, the most mannerly people you'll ever meet, they're aghast, like, what's about to happen? And she just keeps walking, and she walks right up to me, and she looks, and she's tiny. I'm 6'3" without my hat. So I'm like 7. She looks up and she kind of smiles, and she lifts the garbage lid off, and she drops her nasty noodles right into my table. And I jam the top on, and I look at her, and the audience is aghast. I mean, their eyes are the size of Oreos because they're like, this woman has just offended this performer. What are we going to do? So I'm thinking on my feet. I turn to the audience and I yell, "Hakushu dozo," which means you clap really loud, everybody. And so everybody claps for the lady, and she totters off. And I pretend like, it's no big deal to have nasty noodles all over everything that's in my garbage can, right?
Oh, it happens all the time. It happens all the time, right?
Right. You just roll with it. Like falling into a pool.
That's right. All right, here's the next one. Are you ready for it? Here we go.
Hit me.
During a show in the UK, a roadie broke Steve's guitar. Jeff Lynne, the lead guitarist for ELO, Electric Light Orchestra, was backstage with his grandson. He had an extra guitar in the trunk of his car and let Steve use it for the rest of the show.
That is so false, but please let that happen someday.
That was very detailed. I worked very hard on that.
Very, very well done. And I would absolutely like that to happen, but it's false, not true.
Okay, here we go. In the middle of winter, Steve slept in his van in a Sheraton parking lot, and nobody ever knew.
That's 100% true. Back in the day when I was trying to get my career going, I would go to these NACA, National Association for Campus Activities, booking conferences, and I didn't have any money. They were really, really, really expensive. So you have to buy a booth, and then you stand there and you sell yourself, and these college students will bring you in as coffee house entertainment or lunchtime nooner entertainment. And there was, back in the day, there was a huge market for this, but I didn't have any money for the hotel. So what I did is during the day, I would be, hey, you should buy my show. And I'm doing the booth and I'm handing out brochures and business cards. And then when the sun went down, I would sneak out into the Sheraton parking lot and pretend like, let's see, what did I do? I'd pretend like I was getting my jacket out of my van. And then I would hop into the van and close the door. And I would sleep out there because, it was like $200 a night. And, I didn't have $6 or $8 or $1,000. So I would sleep there. And then the next morning I would run into the bathroom of the Sheraton and kind of clean myself up so I looked like I hadn't freaking slept in my van. Here's the thing. If you want it, you have to be willing to work for it. And I really wanted it.
Yeah. And not everybody, you don't start out where Steve Trash is now, today. A lot of people, they look at entertainers and they say, well, I want to be David Copperfield. Well, you know what? At 16, 17 years old, David Copperfield was not David Copperfield. It took him a while to get there.
That's right. And part of the thing is David Copperfield was given some natural talent, but you know him today. The man was hungry. He wanted it. And so he worked for it, and whatever that took. And that's what I would say is if you're a variety artist and you are in it or you want to be in it, listen, you're going to have to hang out what the dream is and continually work for it, because I don't know a person that doesn't constantly get the door slammed in your face. And you know what? You may have to secretly sleep in your van every once in a while. I've done it more than once.
Yep. I think all of us have. All right, here's another one. Steve Trash's real name is Steve Goldfarb.
No, that's too easy to spell. That's false.
Yeah, when you brought it up earlier, I was thinking to myself, oh no, he's going to say his real last name, and I'm not going to have one of these things that I made up. But you don't have to tell me if you don't want.
No. Yeah, I don't. It gets in the way. It's when children ask me, "What's your real last name?" Oh, is that your real name? And I say, "My friends call me Steve Trash," and
there you go.
That neutralizes.
Okay, last one. Here we go. Steve once impaled a volunteer's finger with a card and thumbtack.
That's absolutely true.
Oh, how did that happen?
Okay, so first of all, we Americans, we grow some pretty solid stock in Iowa. I'm just saying. So I'm working this. I was working a county fair in I can't remember what part of Iowa, but back in the day, Michael Amar had a trick called indoor baseball, and the long and the short of it was the volunteer would hold an old school dartboard that had sort of baseball markings on there, right? And that's why it's called indoor baseball. So volunteers holding this, and the effect is someone selects a card, they return it to the deck is shuffled, and you take a thumbtack and you push it into the end. So it's just sort of jammed in between cards, nowhere in particular. Then you take these cards and you throw them at the dartboard, not very far away, a foot or two, not very far away. The thumbtack jumps out, impales itself on the selected card, which I think at the time I think they've signed it too. So it sticks to the dartboard. The signed card has found itself. So I performed this very well for a couple of years, and I'd never had any problems at all. And there is a reason Michael called this indoor baseball. So this poor woman is holding this thing. Her hand is on the left side and the right side, and I back up and I'm maybe 3 feet away, and I rear back and I cock and I throw all of these cards at the dartboard. The wind picks the deck of cards up and it flicks over. Thank goodness the statute of limitations have run out, because that thumbtack went right through the card, right through the tip of her fingernail, and right through the very, very end of her finger. Right? Wow. I mean, it didn't really stick into the finger. It just sort of grazed it. And there's just like the tiniest little bit of blood there. And I'm horrified. I'm thinking, first of all, oh man, did I mess that up? And second, I'm thinking, this lady is going to sue my britches off. And so I realized what's happened, and it was her middle finger, and she pulls her middle finger away and she starts flicking it like it doesn't hurt. And she's holding this card with a thumbtack stuck through it to her finger, and she goes, "Wow, that's amazing." The audience claps like I planned to impale this poor lady's fingernail.
The old card on the finger trick.
Yeah, and she unplugged it, and unplugged it meaning she pulled it out of her fingernail, and oh, God bless her, because you would never be able to get away with that today. And I just thanked her profusely, and I think I probably even gave her a $50 bill.
You're like, thank you very much. Good night.
Yes, yeah, and I never did that trick ever again.
That was fact. Or something John just made up.
Let's get into our fan questions then. My friend Annie Banani. Do you know Annie Banani?
I love Annie Banani.
Who doesn't love Annie Banani? She's a balloon storyteller, and she says, ask him about branding and goals. He's awesome at both of those.
Well, first, thank you, Annie. I think what she means by goals would be that you need to figure out what you want to accomplish in a dream way. I mean, there are reasons that I want to be a Rockin eco hero, and those are emotional reasons. Like, I love the laughter of children, and that's an emotional reason. That's the dream. The dream is to be Steve Trash, Rockin eco hero, spreading smiles, spreading an understanding of the connections in nature. What actually emotionally gets you excited about your job? That's the dream. And then goals are measurable, and those are the steps that will actually get you to that dream. And they have to be measurable in terms of quantity and date. Like, let's say a goal of yours might be to do at least 10 shows of this new show that you've just written before December the 31st, right? That's a goal. It's measurable. At the end, on January the 1st, you know whether you accomplished that or not. And the proper alignment of those goals must be with your dream, the thing that you really, really, really want out of this. I mean, why are you in the game? Yeah, and that should feed every goal that becomes the steps along the way. I hope that's clear.
That's very, very clear. Great advice. All right, so Brett Bolich, a terrific magician out here in Los Angeles, asks, how's the TV show going? Love the pilot.
Hey, Brett, thank you very much. Yeah, I wrote, I have a relationship with a pretty well-known very well-known kids entertainment company, and the long and the short of it was I had to put together a pilot for a kids television show called Trash TV. I had to shoot it, so I shot it. I have access to a really great studio locally, and we're up to about 100,000 views on Facebook, and it's a slow-going thing, but everything's going good. Thank you for asking, Brett.
I watched some of those. They're wonderful. Anybody listening to this, you should watch them.
Thank you.
They're great. All right, Pete Ellison, a terrific musician. I think you know Pete too.
I do know Pete. Yeah, he's a smart guy.
Yeah, he's a terrific musician out of LA and the creator of Show Operations, one of the top CRMs in the business, says, Steve is such a nice guy with a big heart. We had time to catch up at CAX, which is a magician or a children's entertainer conference. Here's his question. With so many projects going on and many of them demanding lots of energy, how do you allocate your time so that nothing slips through the cracks?
The answer is, by the way, great question, Pete. The answer is threefold. First, I find somebody that allows me to focus on what we talked about before, those 6 things: create, perform, steer the ship, R&R, prep, or delegate, okay? And so I have this executive assistant. She lives way up in Connecticut. I live in Alabama. So we only communicate via telephone, text, or email. I have given her the job of don't let me screw up, right? So she knows to check on Steve. Steve, are these hotel reservations made? Steve, are these airplane reservations made? Or more important, do I need to make them? And then she checks calendars, because I'll sometimes write down 12 when it's supposed to be 21. So Pamela's job is to check that stuff. And so we are regularly in touch to keep eyes on the prize. And frankly, the other thing that my wife taught me is I don't take my telephone is turned off after 5 p.m. And I know some people can't do that, but because I've been in this business for so long, it can simply wait until the next business day. So from 5 o'clock until the next morning, but I get up early. I'm up at 4. So I get your message at 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock the next morning, and I'm able to respond. But that's just one for domestic bliss. That's one thing that I've built. I also have an office in my home. I have a television studio in my home as well, where I go and shoot things and I rehearse things, and that's a very separate space. But I hope that answers it, Pete. Is I make sure someone's checking my work.
Yeah, it sounds like you're focusing on the things that you're good at, and you have somebody else do some of the things and keep track of some of the things that maybe you don't want to take care of.
Yeah, and I have a way of, I don't know if this is helpful to anyone, but I have a way of breaking down what those big rocks are that we talked about before.
Yep.
I'm a very visual guy. I like pictures a whole lot. So think about it this way. There will be 3 types of activities that you and I will work on in terms of what our career looks like, okay? And the day-to-day work, I consider... So, by the way, we're cutting down trees. All right, that's our job. We cut down trees. Every day we have a sharp axe and we are chopping away at that tree. We are chopping down the tree. That's the day-to-day work. But then there's the stuff that makes us really better at what we do. And that's chainsaw stuff. That may be rehearsal, or that may be creating a new routine, or sharpening your skills at something. And you take the chainsaw and you just cut right through the tree. The third thing is, like Brett was asking about this television show, I will shoot for the moon. I will put some of my time into something that has enormous payoff, but it's very, very low probability. And I call that, matches. And so you could set the woods on fire with those matches. So you have a choice of an axe, you have a choice of a chainsaw, or you have a choice of a box of matches. And each one of the things that I work on each day falls into one of those categories, because there should be some reward from each one, but just know which one that is. So you're moving forward instead of only working on the day-to-day stuff, just, the little bitty piddly stuff. Because, who knows, the matches may really get you to leap forward in your career in a big way.
So what's some good advice for a beginner who's just starting out?
Let's see. Gosh, if I were starting out in the variety arts
again,
yeah, I have 2 bits of advice that I think might be of value. Can I share 2 things?
Please.
Okay, number 1, buy rechargeable batteries. Rechargeable batteries will cost you less money in the long run, and you will make a lot less waste and pollution. And I highly recommend PowerX Pro, PowerEX Pro. They're fantastic. I use them every day of my life. The second thing I would recommend if I were a beginner, and frankly, I still do this, is focus on this Japanese idea of Kaizen, constant and never-ending improvement. There is always a way to make it better. There is always a way to improve it, and build your life focused on the ways that things can be improved, and don't beat yourself up if it just completely and totally sucks. Everybody's been there. Everybody's done that. Just the worst thing is to stop at "it sucks, I can't make it better," or "I suck, I can't get better," because both of those are actually false. You can be better. I don't know if you can be awesome or amazing, but can you be better? There's no question. You can be, and the way to do that is tiny baby steps of looking for tiny improvements every day.
Yeah, my first show ever, and I'm sure a lot of variety artists listening to this, my first show ever was terrible. I admit it to this day. It was horrible. And I imagine most people starting out, their first couple of shows aren't really that good. It takes a while to develop the routines, to develop your relationship with the audience, to develop your character. It just takes a while.
Bless youth intelligence as well, right? In some cases, we don't know we're as bad as we actually are, and in some cases we do. I don't think we're as bad as we think we are, but the point is, it's really, again, this is something my wife has taught me, the whole thing is more about the journey than the destination.
Yep.
So constantly look for ways to improve.
Yeah. How about the working pro, the guy that's been doing it for quite a few years?
I would say congratulations. If you're still a working pro, you're awesome. So I do have to, again, if 2 are okay, I'm going to share 2 bits of what I would say are advice for pros.
Sure, please.
Again, buy rechargeable batteries.
By the way, I'm going to put that brand into my show notes so they can take a look, and even if they want to just click on that, they can click onto it and buy them right out of my website.
Yeah, please do, because it's PowerX. And listen, here's a little insider secret. You can buy the batteries, but you can charge them in the rechargers that you can buy at Walmart for not a lot of money. You don't have to buy the super expensive PowerX charger. Doesn't matter. I've used them for years using the Walmart rechargeable battery chargers. Walmart, they're like Energizer. I think Energizer makes that. But the second thing I would say, and probably most of your working pros do this, but I would say to keep yourself excited about what you do, find ways to stay open to the muse. That if a great idea comes to you, or even kind of a halfway idea, build your life with systems around you to collect those. Use your iPhone. The second something that's not even a fully formed idea, voice memo it, or write it down on. I'm particularly passionate about yellow legal pads, right? So scribble it down on that, or put it down in notes in your phone, or wherever works for you. Give yourself the ability to always be open to a new idea, and then go back and revisit those, because you will be stunned by the cross-pollination that can happen in your life from ideas that you had 6 months, 6 years ago, and they now meet the person that you are. You can find extraordinary ways to solve the problems or create new routines that you didn't have in your mind at that time. I have this idea, I call it the little librarian, and everybody has experienced this. Is maybe they've come up against the wall and they can't solve a problem. Maybe it's a career problem or a personal problem, and then they just give up. And then they wake up the next morning and they have at least a partial solution. It's because the little librarian was given the responsibility of going and finding the book that had the solution in it. So you put her to work, and she went to work and she found that solution. And I find if you stay open to the muse, that little librarian, that's all she likes to do is go find creative solutions. That's her job. And if you encourage her, her muscles get bigger. And it can work on multiple problems too. It doesn't just have to be that one. It can be multiple problems, because that's why I say build your life around this. Have the clipboard, which is my favorite, is the yellow pad clipboard, or have the phone. So if you're driving, you don't need to be scribbling stuff. Just do the voice memo thing and write down that idea, because the muse has come to you and she has said, there is something here. And if you refuse the muse, she won't come back. So stay open to her, because she will continually revisit you.
Nice. So give us one book recommendation, one or two, and tell us why.
I'm going to recommend this is my most favorite book of late, and there's a TED Talk on this. She's a professor. I think she's at Yale, and the author is Angela Duckworth, and the book is called Grit: The Power of Passion and Perseverance. Mm-hmm. And I don't know a person that is a successful variety artist that hasn't had to have the characteristic of grit. There will be so many people that tell you no. There will be so many people that look at you askance. I mean, in the beginning of my career, I auditioned at, and this is the very beginning, but I auditioned at the Magic Castle, which of course is the premier magic club possibly in the world, but obviously in Hollywood. And I come in and I audition, and I'm already busking. I'm already making a good living doing this. And I killed the audience. I mean, I killed. These were just straight people. They weren't magicians. They were just normal people. And I thought, I'm in, baby. They love me. This is going to be fantastic. I'm in. and when the audience leaves, these three people, they're looking at me like kind of sad and almost like, I'm like, oh no, wait, what? And sure enough, they wouldn't let me in. They said, your whole trash thing, it's just not what we're going for at the Magic Castle. And I said, but didn't you just see the audience? They loved it. They said, yeah, it's just not, we're just not really the trash thing. And mind you, the only thing that I have ever seen as being the pinnacle of success as a magical entertainer is the Magic Castle. I've just killed. I mean, literally, I've killed. They thought I was fantastic. And I'm not one of those, I hear jokes, I hear people laughing when I'm not funny. That's not my style. Yeah. I did really well for this audience. And for about a week, I was crushed. And then I realized, just forget it. I'm already working for real people. They already love me. I'm already doing my thing. I'm already doing something so much more interesting than whoever you people are that are judging me, I would say incorrectly. I'm going to double down on this. So I went even deeper into being Steve Trash and even deeper into branding myself as being unique. If you do this, there are going to be so many people that don't get you, because they don't understand what in the world you're doing. Because from the very beginning, John, what I was trying to do was smash these two things together, which was this ecological theme with eco-entertainment, with magic tricks. I didn't want to tack it on top. Right? I didn't want to have a theme that I just sort of did a couple of tricks that were like, no. They had to be inseparable. This thing had to flow through me and out to the audience. there are not a lot of examples of how that has been done. And so thank goodness I was just ignorant. I just took that rejection and absorbed it and said, okay, apparently I'm going to have to build a career without your help. 20 years later, I get to perform at the Magic Castle. Everything's copacetic, had a great time. It was wonderful. Still go there all the time.
Yeah, I have a similar story. Here in Southern California, we have something called the Segerstrom Center, and they book a lot of school assemblies. And when I first started doing this, I sent them what was a videotape at the time with my show on it. And they wrote back, well, we watched the first 5 minutes of your video and you're a magician and that's not an art. So we can't accept your submission. I said, okay. And I did the exact same thing as you. I said, all right, I will take that and I'll go home and I'll do 300 or 400 shows a year and take your business. And that's fine with me. If you don't want to work with me, that's totally fine. I'll take what I do best and I'll do it myself.
You know, I think going back to what Annie Banani had asked, there's always some room to understand whether criticism is valid or not.
Yep.
So in your case, you then positioned yourself in the market not as a magician, and the same with me. I positioned myself at, I just made this thing up, the Rockin Eco Hero. That doesn't mean anything. I just liked it, and I thought it sounded cool, and I was like, yeah, it sort of fits my image of what I want to be. And it's a pretty good title. It's not a great title, but it's a pretty good title, and it sort of expresses this person is in his own category, right? And I kind of like that, because if you're in your own category, it opens you up. I can do music with a gas can, you know, or I can do magic tricks, or I can do some old vaudeville style comedic gags where stuff is flying on and off of the stage. The field is open. I don't have to be limited to one type of variety art. And I would say to everybody, if you're really into this, study everything everyone has ever done. I mean, if I were a kid starting over again, I would probably spend my whole day watching people like Avner be hilarious, hilarious with just props, and the cleanliness with the way he responds to the audience and looks at the audience and picks up a prop, and he has that perfect control, and he knows how to tell a story. I took a couple of years off where I was sort of reevaluating what Steve Trash was, because I wasn't making the headway I wanted. And I took 3 months. I moved to LA and I took improv classes at Second City just to learn to be a better comedy writer and to do improv. Didn't have really anything to do, but it made me a better artist. I started in my own Make a Movie series. I started writing my own short movies, and I'm surrounded by people that are really talented. I've got some DP friends, some gaffer and grip friends, and I would get them, and on a weekend we would go out and shoot a movie, because it taught me to be a better storyteller. And every variety artist is telling a story. The story is, hey, these are balls. Hey, I'm going to throw them in the air. Hey, look, I just caught her. That's a story, beginning, middle, end. You know, everybody has a story. Magic trick. Oh, hey, I've got this ball. Oh, it disappeared. Oh, it appeared again. That's a story. You know, We're telling stories.
Now, I could talk to you for hours and hours and hours, but I want to be a little bit respectful of your time. You have a special offer for our variety artists. Is that right?
I do. I was really, I don't really sell anything to the entertainment world, but I was inspired by your podcast. And several years ago, my friend Mark Daniel and Steve Axtell asked me to come out and do a talk at their CAX lecture in Southern California. And I was just so impressed with the quality and the caliber of people out there that if you go to my website, on the bottom right corner, I've created this short video about my encounter with Mr. Electric. And the idea behind it is I want to share with others how they can drill down and find what their light bulb is. Even if you are beginning your career, you're in the middle of your career, or maybe you're even at the end, there is always a way to be more just you. there's always a way. And this video is sort of like steps that you can go through and there's some funny stuff in the video. It's free. Just go and click on the little bitty icon in the bottom right-hand corner of stevetrash.com. And what does it say? Find your light bulb, I think.
It says find your light bulb. Yeah, I watched it this morning. It's great. It really breaks it down one step at a time. If you follow these steps, you can really find your character a lot better.
Thank you. Well, what I want most, my mom was a teacher, my aunt was a teacher, my grandmother's the teachers, and I have the teacher spirit. And so it's really important to me to share what I've learned. You don't necessarily have to give me credit. I don't really care about that. But I had to just claw this stuff out myself with very little help. And in most cases, frankly, rejection from others. And now that I found what works, I really want to share it with others. And here's the thing. If you find this video helpful, or if you found my talk with John helpful, the only favor that I really want, they don't even have to do this, at the top of my page is a banner. Go and buy one of my t-shirts. They don't even hardly say Steve Trash on them. One of the t-shirts says peace, love, and recycle, and one says be good, be amazing, don't be mean. You can't even hardly see my name on there. But if you like what I've done and what we've talked about, maybe buy one of my shirts for a kid that you think would like it, because there are lots, and they're only like $13 or cheap.
That's nice. You give us something for free, and then the t-shirts for somebody else. I love talking to you, Steve. You're great.
Well, thank you. It's absolutely been a pleasure.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. We'll end it there. And thank you, Steve, for doing my podcast. Where can someone get a hold of you if they want to get a hold of you or your show?
The best way is always through stevetrash.com. I'm all over social media if you're into that. But I think the best way to find me is stevetrash.com.
Perfect. And thank you to all my variety artists. If you found this podcast valuable, tell a friend. That's how we can spread the word. And feel free to reach me at my email at john@thevarietyartist.com, or join my Facebook group at The Variety Artist, where you can ask me to ask questions of our guests, like my friend Steve. On Twitter, I'm at The Variety Artist with an S on the end, no T because we didn't have room. Or visit my website at The Variety Artist, where you find super informative blogs and all the show notes from today's interview. Now go out and book those gigs, make some money, and have some fun.
That's all for this episode of The Variety Artist, but your journey continues on our website. Go to thevarietyartist.com for more strategies, insight, and resources, as well as show notes on today's guest to assist you in your career. We'll see you on the next episode of The Variety Artist. But until then, go out and book those gigs, make some money, and have some fun.